Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 56th monthly talk of the Rail Enthusiast Society. We were more or less forced to start this during COVID, although we had been thinking about it earlier also, and we would have probably started it sometime anyway. But COVID sort of gave us a kickstart, and we started this. And I must say, we are now in our 56th talk, and I hope we will reach 100 very soon. So today's speaker is Mr. Manikandan Venkatramanan. He doesn't really need an introduction because he has already given two talks, and this is going to be his third talk. From what I recall, the only persons who have given more talks than him are Tulya Sinha and myself. So Manikandan is well known. Money for short. I don't use the term money because we have two more Manis who are members of RAS. Anyway, above everything else, Mani is a rail enthusiast, and the two talks that he had given covered topics that are normally not covered in these talks. One was capitalist railroading in the USA, and his second talk was Introduction to the Swiss Railroad Network. Now, these are again topics that are normally not covered, and I must say his ability to do research and go into topics is extremely good. In one of our annual conferences, he had talked about signaling, which is not his subject at all, and purely by researching and going into it. Therefore, he is very well placed for today's talk, which is a brief history and the development of the Mysore State Railways. Now, if you go through any of the history books in India on Indian railways, you will find that we normally talk about railways in Bombay, railways in Calcutta, and railways reaching towards Delhi. Very rarely do we have anyone talking about the Mysore State Railway. So today, this gap is going to be filled, and we are going to hear about the Mysore State Railway. Over to you, Mani.
Thank you very much, sir, for such a kind introduction. And I would like to thank everybody in RES for giving me this opportunity. So I have shared my screen. So first of all, let me know if you can see my
It's
screen.
visible. No problem. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. So before I begin, let me give you a short context as to how this entire project came about. So as you know, I also serve as a director of a UK-based company called WattTrain. And one of the fellow directors in WattTrain by the name of Peter Lewis, who had incidentally had joined some of our RES annual conferences as well. He had actually encouraged me to present a paper in what is called as the Early Railway Conference in the UK. The Early Railway Conference is organized by a group of institutions in the UK, namely the Railway Canal and Historical Society, the New Common Society for the History of Engineering and Technology, the Institute of Civil Engineers, and so on. So they every 2 years or 3 years they conduct this conference, and this year it was extra special because it was conducted on the occasion of 200 years since the opening of the public railway line from Stockton to Darlington in 1825. So he asked me to do original research. So whatever you're seeing right now is the outcome of that original research. The British, of course, had asked me to stop till 1900 because the theme of the conference was early railway. So I started off from 1864, which is when the saga of railways in Mysore State, which is currently Karnataka, began, and they asked me to stop till 1900. However, the story continues till 1951. The research beyond 1900 is still subject to research and developments, which is ongoing, but bits and pieces of it I will try to cover post 1900 in a very short detail based on the time that we have. But let us start the presentation itself. So as you can see, this is the logo. What you see here is of the Southern Railway and its constituent companies. And I think this insignia I took from the Mysore Railway Museum. They had placed it at a very beautiful location. And the background is the Mysore Railway Museum. And then you had this insignia sparkling, and it's a very well maintained, a great museum. So on the right, you see an elephant. That elephant was generally, though not always, the company seal and insignia of the Madras Railway Company. And then what you see at the bottom, this is the two-headed eagle, which is generally an imperial signet. It was not just used in India, it was also used in other countries like Iraq, uh, the royal family of Iraq, of Jordan, of Russia, so on and so forth. But in India, it represents Garuda, and the two-headed eagle is called Ganda Berunda. which signifies both your secular and the prosperous side as well as the spiritual side. So both are represented as an imperial insignia, as a royal family maintaining and managing both. So this is the insignia of the Mysore royal family. And the same thing they had given to the railway that they started, the Mysore State Railway. And at the top, you have the symbol of Gol Gumbaz. The Gol Gumbaz, which is there in Bijapur in North Karnataka, that was the insignia, the symbol used by the Southern Maratha Railway Company. Madras and Southern Maratha merged together to form Madras and Southern Maratha. Mysore State Railway was separate, and then all the three joined together, joined forces, and then they became the Southern Railway region or South Zone of the Indian Railway network. So those are the three constituent companies: the Madras Railway, Mysore State Railway, and the Southern Maratha Railway Company. Okay, moving on to the next slide. The foundations of railway lines, early railway lines in Mysore State. The first railway line traces its origin to the Madras Railway Company, and that was initiated, and the line was opened in 1864. We will talk a little bit about it in the subsequent slides, but this is just an overview. Subsequently, the Mysore State Railway was formed as an initiative of the Mysore Darbar, the royal family of Mysore, and that was from 1879 to 1886. What happened in 1886? We will come to that. That's another interesting story, because the railway was funded and operated exclusively from the revenues of the Mysore state and by the royal family from their own treasury and from even from their personal funds. They ran out of money and they had to give the railway to a British enterprise operating out of London, incorporated in London, which was the Southern Maratha. So the Mysore State Railway went to the Southern Maratha. It was hypothecated to the Southern Maratha, and then it ran as Southern Maratha for some time. And then Southern Maratha itself had its lines in the northern part of Karnataka connecting with Mysore State Railway at Harihar. We are going to talk about that as well. Southern Maratha was one of the, you had the guaranteed systems like GIPR and East Indian Railway, but Southern Maratha was called as the modified guarantee system. And since we covered till 1900, I put till 1900. But in the year 1919, under Sir M. Vishweshwaraya and later on his subsequent Dewans, especially his protege, Sir Mirza Ismail, uh, they were so upset that the Mysore Railway was taken over by the British. They had to take it over again. So they generated the funds and took the railway back. So that is another interesting story, which hopefully it's still under research, but we'll try to cover that. So these are the three railways. So 1864 Madras Railway, Mysore State Railway 1879 to 1886, where it was hypothecated to Southern Maratha, Southern Maratha Railway itself operating under the Mysore State 1882 to 1900. Next, of course, so with any industrial enterprise, the people are as important as the technology. So the three people whom you are seeing here played a outsized role in the early railway development in Mysore State. On the left, you see Sir Mark Cubbon, who's eponymous by the park, which is currently there in Bangalore called Cubbon Park, though that came later. He was, if I'm not wrong, he was born in Isle of Man, and he was one of the enlightened commissioners of Mysore State. Okay, now to understand what a commissioner is and what role they played, we need to understand a little bit about the history of Mysore State itself. So there is something called the rendition, pre-rendition and post-rendition. Rendition means transfer of power to the Mysore royal family. So what happened in Mysore was that after the defeat of Tipu Sultan in the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War, the British decided to hand over power back to the Mysore royal family. So what had happened was the Mysore royal family had been ruling this southern Karnataka for since the 13th century. So they trace their origins to Raja Udayar from Dwarka. So he had come here and then he had taken over the reins of Mysore under the wishes of Devi, who is there in the Chamundi Hills, who is their patron deity. So they had been ruling either as subordinate kings to the Vijayanagar Empire or to other bigger dynasties, and then they were, and then Tipu Sultan had taken power from them. Hyder Ali, his father, had taken power from them, and then they had fought with the British. There was the Anglo-Mysore War. Tipu was defeated in the storming of Srirangapatnam. And then what had happened? The British decided to hand over the power back to the Mysore royal family as their vassals. And the first king there was Krishnaraja Udayar III. Of course, he doesn't have any role to play here. he was not considered to be a very good king. So after the power was transferred, what happened? British wanted to take power back again. So they had appointed people called as commissioners in Mysore State, one of the earliest commissioners was Sir Mark Cubbon. So he was an enlightened administrator. So in this region, and this is where I would like to say here, unlike what Sashi Tharoor and others had mentioned, that might be true for the entire rest of the country, where railways were primarily seen as defense, resource exploitation, and all that. In this region of the country, the underlying theme of progress and prosperity of the region was always present. Though the strategic objective and resource exploitation was there, but both the commissioners, the royal family of Mysore, and the Dewans, all of them, they had an overarching theme to use the railway to ensure industrial development of this region and also to ensure economic prosperity for the people. That also you will see, because the way they constructed the railway line, and then the reason for constructing the railway line, one of the main reasons was famine relief. This was more than 100 years before Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his New Deal, where he used government policy to ensure employment during times of crisis like the Great Depression. This predated it, and these guys had actually used the railway construction as a mechanism to generate employment as well as for famine relief. That was a very unique thought process, which was not explored even in England. So, and we're going to see more of such things that we're going to come across more of such unique aspects of it as well. So, Sir Mark Cubbon, he streamlined the administration, the finances, and he also had a good education policy. Though he was not, he was a very conservative administrator, but he did have initiate a great education policy for the state. That is Sir Mark Cubbon. And then the royal personage that you see in the center is His Highness Sir Chamarajendra Udayar. He was the son of Krishnaraja Udayar III. This person was considered to be a stoic sage king, just like Marcus Aurelius and other Roman emperors. And the British were so happy with his maturity and the way he and his capability that they decided to hand over power back. So that is called the rendition. And post rendition is what we're going to see what the Mysore royal family did. So pre-rendition with the commissioners, post-rendition with the Mysore royal family. And the person on the right is one of the Dewans of Mysore, Dewan Seshadri Iyer. There were other Dewans as well, but the person who ensured that there was a large piece of momentum in the construction of railway lines in the state, the person who ensured lobbying, the person who was also a financial engineer to ensure that the finances are also proper for the construction of the railway line, was this man. And we are going to see a little bit about him as well. Of course, he was not able to, I'm sorry, I think it went somewhere. Yeah. Yeah. So of course, he was not able to be completely successful. He had to hypothecate it to save the state's finances, but we're going to see his great efforts in expanding railway lines in the state. So this is Mark Cubbon. This is a Raja Ravi Verma painting of His Highness Chamarajendra Udaya the 10th. He was called the Raj Rishi. And then, of course, Devan Seshadri Iyer. Okay, so why they wanted to develop railway lines in this region? So I did talk about famine relief, employment generation. Of course, transport and natural resources is there. So there were a lot of discussion by the chief commissioners as well as by the king and the Devans to transport coffee, arka nut and other spices from this region to Bombay so that that could be exported. So the ultimate objective was to connect with the SMR and eventually the GIPR to Pune and then Bombay to ensure export of resources. And of course, there was also a growing European population in Bangalore because of the great weather, and they wanted means of transportation. The third thing also played a very critical role. Gold was discovered in a region called Kolar. So we all know about Kolar gold fields. To extract resources from that region, railways were thought of as a venture to utilize the resources there. And we are going to see about how all these played a role in railway development in this region. Okay, pre-1864. So the Madras Railway Company, there were two Madras Railway Companies. One was formed and dissolved, and then again, a second time, there was another Madras Railway Company which was incorporated in London. And if I'm not wrong, Robert Stephenson himself and Sir Isambard Kingdom Brunel, both of them, I think they served as some in some consulting capacity for this company. And they wanted to devise what was called as the Bangalore branch of the Madras Railway Company, which we're going to see. That will be the first. The first line was laid by the Madras Railway Company as a branch line from Jolarpettai to Bangalore. So that is something which we are going to see. And then, though Mark Cuban had lobbied very hard with the government of India, with the British overlords, with the British Crown to bring railways in this region, he couldn't see the railway as long as he was the chief commissioner, but that honor went to his successor, Lewin Bentham Bowring. That is his photo that you see here. So he was instrumental in setting up the first railway line from Jolarpet to Bangalore in 1st of August 1864. So here, though it was by the Madras Railway Company, majority out of 80 miles or so, we are going to see the proper track mileage shortly in one of the slides, but out of 80 miles or so, 50 miles lay within the sovereignty of the Mysore royal family. So they had given the lands for the construction of this railway line. So that is something that we have to call out. All right. 1860s to 70s. So after the first line was laid, there were multiple proposals. As you know, till 1882, if I'm not wrong, it was still under the commissioners. It was a pre-rendition era. So the commissioner of Mysore had put up multiple plans for the expansion of the railway line in the state to open up this region for trade and for resource, to open up feeder lines. So you are going to see how they wanted to expand the railway line in the south, the north, the northeast, as well as to the northwest. So we will have a map. We'll see how the railway line expanded, and of course how to use railway lines for famine relief. This was used by both the commissioner as well as by the royal family. So 1880s. So this is when I said the rendition happened. One of the first Dewans after the rendition was Dewan Rangacharlu, and he started off the railway construction post the rendition, and then he was instrumental in raising multiple loans for the construction of railway lines in the state, including a loan of 20 lakh rupees, which was a big amount at that point in time. And then he ensured that surveys were appropriately conducted, so that not just ensuring resource connectivity, but also for the transport of people. And I mentioned famine relief. There was this very specific requirement that any area 50 to 100 miles from should from in the areas which are which were exposed to the famine should be connected by a railway line. So those kinds of policies we would be seeing when you look at the discussions of these people. Okay, right. The first railway line, Bangalore Branch Railway, 1864. The locomotive you're seeing here is a Bayer Peacock locomotive, 042 tank engine. And the station that was constructed by the Bangalore branch of the Madras Railway Company, that eventually became the Bangalore Cantonment Railway Station, that was on broad gauge. The first line, because since the Madras Railway Company was in broad gauge and they also wanted to construct lines in Kolar in broad gauge, this line was also on broad gauge, and the cantonment was the station that was constructed by the Madras Railway Company. So the further details you can see here. Jolapata Bangalore Cantonment, 84.5 miles. 53 miles was within Mysore State. That was given, the land was given by the royal family, as I said. And then it was opened on 1st August 1864 under the chairmanship of Lewin Bowring. Significance, this was the first step towards connecting this region with the further northern Deccan and then eventually to Bombay. And we all spoke about export of cotton, other agricultural produce like coffee and arecanut. And interestingly, one of the things that happen and which we are seeing even now, right? Because Bangalore being the Silicon Valley of India, you see the best and brightest from rest of the country coming here. The first example of it can be traced to this. The artisans, especially potters from Madras, they migrated in large numbers as a result of this railway line. So this was one of the first example of skilled artisanal migration, which was facilitated by this line. Okay, what about the engineering challenges? The chief engineer for this line was Thomas Hardinge Going, and he was a surveyor of the line. He not just surveyed the line, he also constructed the line as well. And he was apprenticed in UK, but he also had a wide-ranging experience in the US. In the US, he worked under Richard Osborne of Philadelphia, and they had worked on constructing the Lebanon, Reading, and Lehigh Valley Rail. It eventually became the Erie Kavanagh and Lehigh Valley Railroads in the US, but this person was in charge of constructing railway lines in the US as well. And then he came to India, and then he has written a very extensive diary of his experiences. Those are the diaries of Thomas Hardinge Going. It was covered by the late R.R. Bhandari ji in his book on the Southern Railway, which was released 150 years. So there's a beautiful extract of how the railways were constructed in this region. So everybody should read the extracts of this diary as mentioned in that book. I'm sorry. Consulting engineer is the gentleman that you see on the right. This is Sir John Hawkshaw. He is the same engineer who was also instrumental in the consulting for the Suez Canal. So he was involved in consulting for the Bangalore branch of the Madras Railway Company. Okay, challenges faced during construction. So, as you know, the word Karnataka itself means highland, right? So you come from the plains of Tamil Nadu to the plateau of Karnataka. So the line had to cross. So it was roughly around 3,000 feet above mean sea level, and then they did large embankments and rock cuttings, which was quite different from what the methodology which was adopted by the navies in the UK. So we had our own community who was instrumental in construction of railway lines in this region. They were called the Wooders. And then the Wooders were basically called as the navies of India. And then the stonework, the well sinking, earthwork. I mean, all these are all explained in great detail in Thomas Hardinge Goen's diaries. And then labor economics. You can see that men were paid 3 pence a day, women were paid 1 penny a day. And then they refused to use wheelbarrows. They preferred carrying any material of even all the rocks on their head only, especially the women. So those are all some interesting things. You can see this is a photograph of a wooder around that era captured by in fact, some of the British, they did anthropological survey of India because there were a couple of viceroys who were more attuned to the Indian interest, who really wanted this survey to understand the Indian psyche deeply when they wanted to rule us. So as a part of it, the anthropological survey was undertaken, and then a lot of research went into understanding what are the different communities across different parts of the country, and then what they did, how they thought, so on and so forth. And then these people, Wooders, were primarily Vaishnavas, and you can see some of them wearing that tilak mark in this photos, especially this old gentleman over here. Okay, and even this guy. Okay, this is the Mysore railway station. And this was a later building. I think this was constructed somewhere around the 1940s in that Art Deco style. But as you can see, when the railway construction moved from the Madras Railway Company, which was in the extreme south in Kolar, and then after the first branch to eventually to the commissioners and to the royal family within Mysore, the gauge that was adopted was the meter gauge, not the broad gauge. So why they adopted the meter gauge? Mainly cost, because and then of course because of the mountainous terrain that it had to traverse. So you had the Maidan and the Malenadu. Two things here in Kannada. Malenadu is the highland, the mountainous region, and then the Maidan, which was relatively flat. So to traverse these, they thought that cost saving, it would be better suited to adopt the meter gauge. So the expenses they estimated was 40 to 50% lower per route mile, route kilometer construction compared to the broad gauge. So you can see that the estimates range from INR 70,000 per route mile to 45,000 per route mile. Whereas this was exactly double when GIPR and EIR were constructing on the broad gauge network, it was double this estimate. So they decided to go for the meter gauge. Okay, so this is a table of gauges. So you can see that the Bangalore branch, broad gauge, 5 feet 6 inches. Mysore State Railway was in the meter gauge. Kolar Goldfield was in broad gauge because that was constructed and run by the Madras Railway Company. And then there were some proposals for narrow gauge railway lines as well. Okay, the expansion. So this is what I was talking about. After the first line, the commissioners, they decided to expand the railway lines in the northeast to the Andhra Pradesh, northwest to connect with southern Maratha, as well as southwest and south to connect to Bepur in Kerala. So, and later on, there were plans by the royal family to connect to Erode and Salem as well. In fact, the royal family paid the money to construct the line and meter gauge up to the border with the Madras Railway Company, but there were some difficulties because of a lot of formalities and bureaucracy involved. But we will come to that later. So these are the initial railway lines: Bagapalli, Marimutulu, Chintamani. This is close to the Andhra border. Mulbagal in Karnataka. Salem district, frontier of Salem district to Malur, and Hoskote, Kargodi. All these things were planned and slowly they were constructed. So you can see that this is Madras. Somewhere here is Jolapattai, and this is Jolapattai, I think, and this is Bangalore. This is the first branch line. The lines were constructed towards the northeast, northwest, and then the southwest. So the Bangalore-Mysore line, though it started under the commissioners, it was completed by the time of Rangacharlu, and that was done by the Mysore State Railway. And then plans were laid by the Mysore State Railway Company to construct to Arsikare, Shimoga, Birur, and then to Arihar, after which they ran out of money. So that is that. And then, of course, railway line construction to the northeastern side to Andhra Pradesh as well. So all these were planned, proposed, surveyed, and then construction carried on. As I said, this was primarily considered as a famine relief mechanism, especially in 1876-78, where this region was hit by very severe famine. So this was like a New Deal stimulus, as I said. So the earthwork between Bangalore and Channapatna was commenced as a relief work, and this was eventually completed by the Mysore State Railway in 1882. Employment provision to thousands, and then there was also the creation of railway towns and provision of permanent infrastructure along the way. And then this is what I was talking about. Area 50 to 100 miles from the railway heads were identified as vulnerable, and then they were supposed to be connected through the railway network. So that was something that they had thought of when they were constructing the railway lines. So this again talks about how they entered into different arrangements with the multiple companies to do the railway construction. I have mentioned the cost, which is 38.82 lakhs in 1879, and then so on and so forth. The other thing, the most interesting thing to note here is that when the railway line was constructed in 1881 from Bangalore to Channapatna to Mandya, so it was from the beginning itself profitable, except for one section. Most of the lines were profitable. So you had 20,749 passengers who traveled, and earnings were 13,219 rupees, even in the first year of operation for that Bangalore Channapatna Mandya line. Next is the Bangalore-Mysore line. So the initiatives were laid in 1879 by the royal family, by the king. This was completed in February 1882 under the stewardship of Dewan Rangacharlu, and the money for the construction came from the revenues of the Mysore state, as well as the balance remained from the subsidy fund. So any royal family that was their vassal had to pay something called as a subsidy fund and salt tax to the British government. The Dewan, especially the Dewan Seshadriya here, had lobbied hard with the British government to reduce this fund and to cut the salt tax so that that money can be used for construction of the railway line. And the British agreed to him. So there, the stature was so high, not just him, even other Devans like Vishweshwaraya, Sir Mirza Ismail, everyone, the stature, they were so very well regarded and so respected, including the king, because they thought that this king had done something really good for the people of his region. The British accepted to their demands. And then they did reduce the subsidy fund and the salt taxes for the construction of the railway line. So this is very, I mean, that also shows to their lobbying skills as well. So this is one old map that I found from one old document in the Mythic Society. So this is Bangalore. So Bangalore-Mysore line, 1879. Mysore and Nanjangoodu, the king had wanted because the Nanjangoodu is a very great pilgrimage center in Mysore. It has a very ancient Shiva temple. So they wanted that town to be linked by the railway. So that is Mysore Nanjangoodu. Then you had the Kolar Goldfields Railway and on broad gauge here. So to Hindupur and Chintamani, this is Andhra border. This was initially proposed by Madras Railway Company, and then I think eventually it was constructed by Mysore State Railway only. Then you had the connection to Tumkur, Arsikere, Birur, Shimoga, one stretch, and then the other one to connect with Dharwar, Hubli in with the Southern Maratha Railway. So they wanted to go up to Gubbi and then Harihar. Harihar was the frontier, after which the Southern Maratha Railway would start. So they wanted to do this. When they were doing this only, they again, I'm telling you, they ran out of money and they had to hypothecate it to the Southern Maratha Railway. So yeah, which leads us to the next thing, which is the Southern Maratha Railway Company. And then, as I said, this was a modified guaranteed railway. So a guarantee was 4% for 7 years and 3.5% subsequently from 1882. I think for GIPR, EIR, the guarantee was 5%, if I'm not wrong. And that's why it was called the modified guarantee system. This is the seal of the Southern Maratha Railway Company. This was taken from the British Library, from the India Office records, on the document which hypothecated the Mysore State Railway to the Southern Maratha Railway. And this is one of the locomotives which was used by the Southern Maratha Railway Company, also by Mysore State Railway, because both of them were on meter gauge. And interestingly, these companies had a predilection for locomotives from either the predecessor companies of not British locomotive company like Nielsen and Company of Glasgow, Dubes and Company of Glasgow, sometimes Sharp Stewart and Company, but mainly Nielsen and Dubes, Nielsen, Dubes and Nasmith Wilson. So all from Glasgow, and then they joined together to form North British, and then they acquired locomotives from North British. They had a fancy for locomotives from there, and they were regular customers of that firm in Glasgow. And this is one of the F class 060 locomotive FM stroke A, I think. This is outside the Vishweshwaraya Industry and Technology Museum in Bangalore. So I just took a photograph of that just to show you the kind of locomotives used, and we have more as well. Okay, moving on. Yeah, this is what I was talking about, the expansion uh, till Mandya, and then Tumkur, the loan of 20 lakhs, and then the line opening to Nanjangud. Everything was out of state funds. And then they wanted to reach Harihar. This photo is of Harihar, and this is the Tungabhadra River. So Harihar was an important junction. And you also have some beautiful Hoysala temples there. And then it is known for Harihareshwara, I think. So that is why it's called Harihar. And after which Southern Maratha saga will start. So that is what it is. I'm just skipping through because I thought we'll have some more questions. We can take some questions as well at the end. So I know we are half an hour through. I'll just take maybe another 10, 15 minutes and then we'll close. So this is the timeline of the railway development. So you can see that initially it would all from 1881 post the rendition. Mysore State Railway would be doing the construction, and then eventually everything would become SMA, Southern Maratha, because as you can see here, from Harihar to Birur, Gubi, Birur, and all that, Southern Maratha takes over the construction because after 1886, the management was given to them. And interestingly, one of the clauses in the this was a British company, though it was operating in India because it was chartered in London. It was incorporated in London, Southern Maratha. Mysore State Railway was run by the royal family itself, and they had various businessmen and trustees on the board, and also the big and powerful industrialist on that board. So one of the clauses was the pension and the salaries for payment of railway staff, which was currently given to the employees of the Mysore State Railway, it should be the same as even after the takeover by the Southern Maratha Railway. And they did not want any reduction in the pension or salaries to their employees. I thought that was really interesting. That this very enlightened capitalism, which you generally did not see at that point in time. Okay. This is the timeline. Next is operational arrangement. This we had already covered. And then the Kolar Goldfield Railways, that was under the operation of the Madras Railway Company. So after all this, so after a portion was taken over by these individual companies for their operational expenses. The remainder, what remains, went to the Mysore Darbar's treasury. So that is how the operational arrangement was even when Southern Vada Railway was operating, or Madras Railway was operating this. So I think around one-fourth of the final revenues that would go to, after deducting all operational expenses, that would go to the Mysore Darbar. Okay. Next, we saw the engineer in charge of the first railway line, which is the Bangalore branch, who was engineer who was responsible for construction of all lines within Mysore till the time it was taken over by Southern Maratha. That was Lieutenant Colonel Augustus La Mesurier. He was there from the inception of Mysore State Railway till the time it was taken over by Southern Maratha. All the important projects were done by him. He was also instrumental in survey and the construction, even the management. He played a very pivotal part in the management of the line itself. And one of the important things that he did, which I don't think not many British officers did, was he encouraged training in engineering for Indian staff. That was not something that was done by other British officers who were in the railways. And he was not, and then one important thing about all these British people were that they were people of multitude of talents. So he did not just do the construction and operational management of the railway line for the Mysore State Railway. He also surveyed the line in Mesopotamia, so in Persia. So you can see that he started from Azerbaijan, Baku, and he surveyed a line through Persia. And this thing I took from the archives of the Qatar National Library. Okay. Next, the Dewans. So we covered, so these two are the major Dewans who were responsible for expansion of railway line in the state. On the left is Dewan Rangacharlu. He started off the construction after the rendition. He raised the loan of 20 lakhs, as I said, and he initiated the Bangalore-Mysore railway line. So I spoke about him. On the right is Dewan Seshadirayar. We covered about him as well. So he was the one who expanded that policy of using railways for famine flood relief, exploitation of new markets, including gold and all agricultural produce, usage of lobbying, right? As I said, he reduced the salt tax and subsidy, and then he used financial engineering. He created sinking funds to ensure that whatever loan raised was repaid properly. But despite that, though he was partially successful at the end, when they reached Harrier, I mean, when they were in the process of constructing till Harrier, they didn't have the money and they had to give it to Southern Maratha Railway. But he ensured that as the railway was transferred to Southern Maratha, the treasury of the Mysore Darbar was not at all impacted. He got all the money back and the treasury was in a good state. So that is something that he ensured. So that is Seshadri Iyer, Devan Rangacharlu and Devan Seshadri Iyer. In fact, the current state library in Bangalore, it is called the Seshadri Iyer Hall. It's named after him. And these are all in 1900, what was proposed, Mysore Hassan, Chikmagalur, Kadu Chikmagalur. And then this is interesting. So this story, the light railway, the story comes a little later when Sir M. Vishweshwaraya takes over as Diwan, much later, after 1900. As a cooperative mechanism with some industrialists, they constructed a system of light railway. So though I'm still under a syndicate in Mysore, so I'm still doing research on this one. Oops. Lines under survey by 1900. So Nanjangu to Gudalur to E Road, so on and so forth. So infrastructure development. So they did build a lot of bridges and they had multiple railway infrastructure across these rivers, Nageri, Chayar, Pennar, Tungabhadra. They developed locomotive workshops and maintenance facilities, so which we all know, which are still around serving the Southwestern Railway, and telegraph lines along the route. So I did come across an old photograph of construction of a railway bridge on the Krishna River by the Southern Maratha after it took over the Mysore State Railway lines. I will show you that it is here only. I will show you the photograph of that. These are some of the locomotives used. As I said, most of them not British, not British. This is Nasmith. Oh, no, sorry. This is Nielsen and Company. So PS 460 meter gauge loco. This is Southern Maratha Railway 460. Interesting. The livery for Southern Maratha was changed, and the most famous livery for Southern Maratha was given by F.H. Trevithick, who was related to Richard Trevithick, the penny and the inventor of the first steam locomotive. So those are all some important things that we come across when we do research. And then this is the N class 260 in Mysore State, again a meter gauge steam loco. Okay. Uh, right. Now we'll end this session with the legacy and some extras which I didn't show the British. So the lasting legacy of early railway lines. So after Devan Seshadri passed away and after Chamarajendra Udayar the 10th, you had his successor Nalvadi Krishnarajendra Udayar or Krishnarajendra Udayar the 4th. He ruled for 40 years, if I'm not wrong, and he created the golden age of Mysore state in industry, economy, prosperity, as well as, I mean, he and his Devans were instrumental in ensuring that there was a lot of progress in Mysore in terms of economic growth and development. So much so that Mahatma Gandhi himself said his Rajya was considered equivalent to Ramarajya. That is a recorded statement. That's what Mahatma Gandhi said. So that is Nalvadi Krishnarajendra Udayar. I will show his photo. So that is him. And then this is Sir M. Vishwesharaya. You would have seen his photo in his older days, but this is him as a young gentleman. And you can see that he was so upset with the railway lines being run by the Southern Maratha. He took it back and then he expanded it because I think the growth after the lines were taken over by Southern Maratha had trickled. There was not that much of an expansion. So they took it over and they started expanding the railway lines. So that light railway concession we saw by Mysore Syndicate, he constructed industrial railways in and around Bhadravati. That iron and steel railways were constructed by him under his watch, and further expansion also happened. And interestingly, he wanted the entire lines to be electrified, similar to what was happening in the United States as well as in Japan. So he had traveled multiple countries, took extensive notes as to their public policy, economic growth, as well as railway growth across different nations, and he wanted to adopt it here. So much so that, as an example, Bangalore was the first city in Asia to get electricity, to have the street lamps powered by electricity. They were one of the first, especially in Asia, being a colonized country at that time, to create hydroelectric power systems, some electricity of which they wanted to power the railway lines as well. So they did all these kinds of initiatives. Both Dewan Seshadri Iyer, who started this, as well as Sir M. Vishwesharaya. That's why I said it's you can, though we were vassals to the British, then you could consider it as a form of a public-private partnership, usage of infrastructure for employment and crisis response, and they facilitated agriculture, trade, and movement of people. And there are records in multiple Mysore State Gazette, Karnataka State Gazette, as well as in the report on administration of Mysore State, as well as in IOR, as to the expansion of agricultural produce and trade, which happened as a result of the construction of railway lines here. You can very well see all this. And they have recorded how much the trade and agriculture expanded as a result of construction of all these railway lines. So yeah, this is their legacy. And then the legacy was continued by Sir M.V.'s protege, Sir Mirza Ismail. And after M.V. Retired from his role as, resigned his role as Diwan in 1919, there were a couple of Diwans, one of whom was Albion Banerjee, who also served as Prime Minister of Kashmir in Cochin. He was Diwan of Cochin, and also Diwan. He had also initiated some railway lines. But of course, Mirza Ismail served as Diwan for a very long period of time, almost till the last king of Mysore, Jayachambarajendra Udayar, and then so under his watch, the railways did expand significantly. So that's why I have his persona here. And then these are something that we covered across. So takeover of Mysore State Railway back to Mysore Darbar in 1919, construction of light railway, industrial railway, expansion of Kola Goldfields Railway, expansion of railway lines further into neighboring Nizam State Railway, Madras Presidency, so on and so forth. So that's what it is. That's the legacy. These are the, I'll take a stop here. So that is the presentation. So we have covered the early railway development till 1900 with a smattering of what happened post 1900. These are some of the extras that I had come across as a result of my research. So on the left, you can see the bridge being constructed on the Krishna River, and this was done by the Southern Maratha. This was incidentally done by an engineer named Arthur Sullivan. And then he had used iron staging as opposed to wooden staging. That was the first time they had tried something like this. I don't know whether it's the first time in the world, but at least it's one of the earliest example of using iron staging. So this is the construction of that bridge on the Krishna River. These are the carriages of the Southern Maratha Railway Company. So they had not just published information about the carriages, but they also raised tenders abroad as to what kind of carriages and the specification of carriages. This is a composite second class, first class carriage of the Southern Maratha Railway Company. And then okay, from here, from this slide onwards, we don't have too many stuff related to Mysore. It's general stuff which I came across, multiple documents. On the left here, you see, I mean, this has got nothing to do with Mysore, but I just thought this was interesting. So that's why I brought this, just to show the kind of information that the British have collected about the railway construction, which not many have covered in the existing literature that we have of Indian railway history. This is one of the bankers on earliest bankers that was on the GIPR on the Ghat section. You have the connecting rods outside the frame and with a very unique truck. And this was a saddle tank banker, again constructed by the North British. The constituent companies are not British. And then other than Rovilkand Railway, they had, and then what I saw here when I went to the engineering records was that they had tried every type of experimentation in India, every kind of innovation, what was there in the steam locomotive design was tried in India. Unfortunately, that is not very well known. So this was, you can see it's a 080, but with you have a connecting rod which is attached to the frame. Just like how you have in some of the electric locomotives, you have one rod, one shaft which is inside the frame. But however, you have a 080 loco. This was other than Rohilkhand Railway. It's a single driver meter gauge engine for India. And this is when the Nilgiri Mountain Railway was constructed. The bottom two photographs. You have the bridge being constructed on color. So that is for a photo. This is a tank locomotive for Northwestern Railway. And why Northwestern Railway? Because Northwestern Railway in India was one of the earliest places where compound steam locomotive design was tried out. So compounding was invented, patented sometime around 1870s by Anatoly Malay of Belgium. You had his designs, and you had Francis Webb of LNWR in the UK. But after all that, they tried compounding to a very great degree and to a very high degree of success in India as well. So Northwestern Railway tried it out. I forgot his name, the engineer's name. And those are his designs. So what you see here, Vampire and Vulcan. Vampire is a two-cylinder compound of the Northwestern Railway, and then the Vulcan is a four-cylinder compound. This was tried in Northwestern India and Punjab, and then those regions. Sandhurst, or I mean, I have his name. I will once his presentation is done, I will tell you his name. So he tried it out in 1883, and this was published in the Proceedings of the Institute of Mechanical Engineers in 1886. And then the Bengal Nagpur Railway also tried to a very great successful extent all compound engines. So this is a Von Boris of Germany and Wurzel consolidated compound design of the Bengal Nagpur Railway. They tried a multitude of compounds, including a Doug line compound, which was very complex, but a very successful locomotive, which was very, very successful in France. The locomotives of Alfred de Glan. That was tried successfully by the Bengal Nagpur Railway till I think phasing out of steam traction. So that was another unique thing that I saw. So I just thought, so these are the compound drawings. Again, this was constructed by Nielsen, incidentally, of Hyde Park in Glasgow for the Bengal Nagpur Railway, a compound locomotive. And so these are again some examples of meter gauge designs that could have been worked on in this I took from a very old book which spoke about early British locomotives, which were supplied to multitudes of regions overseas. So Indian State Railway Class O, I mean, meter gauge design could still have been used in Mysore. Then you have meter gauge tank engine for by Dubes and meter gauge engine for India. So these two could have very well, because they bought a lot of locomotives from Dubes, could have been tried in Mysore as well. And then Rajputana Malwa Railway meter gauge engine, similar designs could have run here. And then, of course, this is that Sharp Stewart's, that unique shaft 080 locomotive design that I was talking about. And then, of course, you had your ubiquitous meter gauge F class. So I just thought this would be interesting for this group, because when you start doing research on something, you also come across some other things that you initially were not thinking of covering. But it shows that whatever Indian historical research that we have only scratched the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot more things to discover and write and to explore. And with that, I would like to thank all of you for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Mani, for a most interesting talk. I really enjoyed it. Um, uh, just one query. I heard about a bridge between Bangalore and Mysore,
Mhm.
which predates the Mysore Railway. It was
Mhm.
perhaps built in earlier days, but then was taken out, and then a meter gauge line was put on top of it. Can you tell us something about that?
You're talking about a bridge between Bangalore and Mysore.
Yeah.
And sir, from whatever, I mean, I don't know the specifics about it, sir. From whatever I know, that line was the construction started in the 1870s by the commissioners of Mysore, and later on taken over by the Mysore State Railway only. So I'm not aware of any other institution doing it prior to the Mysore State Railway. So.
No, the
Hmm.
bridge was built perhaps in Tipu Sultan's time or something.
Okay,
Ah,
okay, 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 okay. Fine, 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 fine.
yeah.
So I think what you're talking about is that when, I mean, I don't know the details about it, but when the son of King Edward VII had come to India, and he wanted to visit the railway lines in and around Bangalore and Mysore. He had seen this bridge. I think, as you rightly mentioned, it has got something to do with Tipu Sultan, but I think it was later on taken over by the Mysore State Railway and then used for construction of railway line there. But I don't know anything beyond that, sir. But this was just a one-off reference I saw in one document.
Because that is often treated as the oldest railway bridge in India.
Okay, okay.
But I think it has now gone with the conversion of to broad gauge.
Yes, yes, yes.
Sir, this is the bridge in which there are MG carriages placed for a museum sort of exhibit. It's a stone arch bridge
I
between
don't know.
Bangalore. Okay,
It's in the middle of nowhere. It's across a river
okay,
with so I don't think it could be a museum. But there is such a bridge
right, right.
which predates the coming of the railway to Mysore. Anybody else would like to comment or ask a question?
Mani, that Krishna Bridge, where is it now? The you showed a construction of the Krishna Bridge.
Let me just give me a minute, Apuji.
Yeah, where is the
But
location today?
Uh, before that, I would like to thank, I can see Mr. David Churchill is here of
Yes,
the, I would like to thank him for the help that he did in helping me to scan the necessary documentation from India office records. Thank you very much once again, sir. And I hope we can take forward this cooperation.
Yes, thank you, Manny, for a fascinating presentation. And I'm I'm pleased to have been able to play some very small part in it. There
Wonderful,
is
sir.
a
Thank you.
vast amount of detailed information in the India office records, but it's not something you can just walk in and find it all together. It's
Yes.
spread around all sorts of different places. So it's probably somebody's life work to continue with the detailed study of the early days of the railways. But I was fascinated by the way Manny brought out some of the people involved. You get these individuals, consulting engineers and others, who played an enormous part in the development of the early railways technologically, and their contribution is often largely ignored.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, once again, for your help and support and all
I'd
this.
just like to mention, I had visited Bangalore station in 2016. The first meter gauge platform that was built at Bangalore had a very interesting ridge and furrow arrangement, which was unusual and adopted at a very few stations in India, and it still existed, along with the assistant, operations office, which was on the top of the small building. Till 2016, I know it was still there. I took some photographs, and I have sort of much older photographs, postcards of Bangalore station, meter gauge station. It is fascinating. It survived so long. I don't
Absolutely, sir.
know whether now after conversion it still remains or has vanished.
So interestingly, sir, the Madras Railway Company, they constructed the cantonment station that was on the broad gauge.
Yeah.
The meter gauge was the Bangalore city station. So to differentiate this from that, so they called it as SBC, the Srirangapatna Bangalore city. That's essentially how they called it. So that's why it's called SBC. So, and there are some, I think Mr. Anand, he would know much more about the layout of the tracks and then how the meter gauge and the broad gauge tracks were and why it's not reachable. I think he was giving me a detailed history of when I was connecting with him on this.
Right. Thank you very much. It's been a very enjoyable talk. I think we have learned a lot. You covered a very wide spectrum about the Mysore State Railway, which was one of the finest meter gauge systems on Indian Railways, perhaps after the RMR. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. One second.
Kaushik, you wanted to say something?
Wonderfully presented, Mani. And it's quite a fact that you mentioned that the gentleman, even before the British, had not the World War occurred, I think the electrification of in and around Bangalore city and Mumbai would have gone in parallel, the electrification work of the railways. The World War One kind of the priorities changed during that 4 years.
Absolutely.
Mani, one question that I can see that Mysore State Railway was leading the development and new technologies and the new techniques which are used in railways. And suddenly there is a lull and nothing happened. It remained meter gauge, it remained backwards till the broad gauge and everything was done. So what are the thing? Is it because of the involvement of the royalty which ensured steady progress, and then once this princely states were abolished, and then the government didn't care because there's no big revenue coming from Mysore? Is that how it works?
Apuji, I don't know if you're talking about post 1947,
Just
but
60, 70, 80, 90, what, 2000, it's, it remains the backward, which is great. I mean, it was a very charming place, but it's a very stark observation that here is the railway system which was putting in all the technologies, the newest one, then okay, we'll get this. Then all of a sudden, and they had, people from the royalty who said, no, we need this to be done. We need these systems to be established. We need the new locomotives, new trackage, everything. And suddenly it's become stagnant and nothing happened. So do you also see it like that?
Well, I think for some time post nationalization, I think the region was not given sufficient importance, especially the light railway systems and the network of lines around Yelahanka, they were all removed. And then you had many innovative rolling stock and technologies which were also taken out. And then not much of importance was given to this region. But I think once the southwestern region was created from the Southern Railway, I think they have slowly started expanding here, Apuji. But that's essentially what I can comment.
One of the reasons for that is that there is very little freight traffic. Indian Railways has sort of been focusing primarily on freight traffic, although it is the second largest carrier of passenger traffic and largest in terms of passenger kilometers. But because there was no freight traffic, no major mineral deposits that could be exploited, perhaps that is the reason it did not get as much focus as other areas.
It doesn't go through. It ends at Srirangapatna and finish. Sorry, it ends at Chamarajanagar and it's over. it doesn't go beyond that. So possibly that's one of the reasons. It's not a through line which is going through, that trains from other regions. Although there is something being proposed which is going to connect Konkan Railway to this side. So I don't know. Or Southern Railways through. So, but anyway, great. I'm very happy to see this presentation, and we look forward to seeing the second part of this presentation as soon as you have it ready.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much for your encouragement. Let's see. I mean,
Yeah.
how it goes.
You haven't told me the location of the Krishna Bridge.
Yeah, that's what
Just tell me, just verbally.
I'm not completely sure where it is. So I just know that it was done by the Southern Maratha on the Krishna. But
So is
I
it
mean,
Raichur Bridge? Is it the Raichur Bridge?
Must be
No.
between Raichur and there is a station called Krishna.
Krishna, correct. So will it be that bridge?
I think somewhere near Yadgir.
Yeah,
Kalburgi.
correct. So that's the major bridge on Krishna. That's right. So it'll be
So the other major bridge is Bezwada.
Vijayawada. Yes, absolutely. Yes, correct. Beautiful. Very nice.
So this was from the archives of the Engineer. That was a magazine that was published in the UK. So I was able to get their archival records. Unfortunately, though it gives the specifications that it's on the River
Doesn't say the
Krishna,
location.
it doesn't say where exactly this bridge is.
Right. Okay, understood. Yeah. Okay. So if there are no further comments or questions, may I close the meeting, sir? Vinu, sir? May I close the meeting?
Yeah, I think we can close now.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye.
very much, everyone. Thank you.